My name is Emily Carter. I'm 26. And the night everything I thought I knew about my family blew up started with the softest sound in the room. A tiny, polite clink of crystal. It was my graduation dinner for my master's in marketing, one of those over-the-top nights my parents live for. All white tablecloths and waiters hovering and a bill I knew I couldn't afford, even if I emptied every account I had. I was sitting there in a dress I bought on a maxed-out credit card, mentally calculating my student loan payment for next month, when my grandma lifted her glass and stood up. The whole private room went quiet like someone hit mute on a remote. She smiled at me, proud and calm, and said, "Emily, I am so proud of how wisely you've handled the $3,600,000 I set aside for you." For a second, I honestly thought I misheard her. 3,600,000 what? My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My chest went tight. The only numbers I knew that big in my life were my total student debt and the price tags on apartments I could never touch. I stared at her and managed to choke out, "What do you mean, 3.6 million?" She looked confused, like I was making some kind of joke. "Your fund," she said. "The money I put away for you when you were born. Your parents told me you've been incredibly responsible with it." Around me, chairs creaked. Someone set their drink down too hard. I didn't even have to look to feel the panic rolling off the people at my table. And that was the moment the shiny little celebration turned into a crime scene in my head, because I realized there was a whole other life I was supposed to have, one nobody had ever told me about. You probably think you know exactly what you'd do if you found out at your own graduation dinner that there was $3.6 million with your name on it, and you'd never seen a single cent. But before you answer, stay with me until the end, because I thought I knew too. And I was very, very wrong. The dinner technically ended an hour later, but for me, it was over the second my grandma sat down, and the noise in the room started up again like nothing had happened. People toasted, laughed, took photos, asked me about my plans, and I nodded and smiled and had absolutely no idea what anyone was saying. I could feel my parents watching me, like they were waiting to see if I was going to explode in front of everyone. I didn't. I just went through the motions until the check was signed and the hugs were done, and we were standing outside the restaurant under the yellow streetlights. My grandma's car pulled up first. She hugged me, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "We will talk more about your future soon, darling. I am so proud of you." I almost told her right then that I had no idea what she was talking about, but my mother's hand landed on my shoulder, tight, and my father said, "Mom, we'll handle it, don't worry. We'll make sure Emily keeps doing the right thing." Like this was some kind of parenting meeting. Grandma gave him a strange look but let her driver open the door. Then she was gone, and it was just me and my parents on the sidewalk, the city buzzing around us. "I'm riding with you," I said. My dad tried to laugh it off. "You got your own place to get to, Em. We'll talk later this week." "No," I said, and even I was surprised at how flat my voice sounded. "We are talking tonight." My mom opened her mouth to argue, saw my face, and shut it again. "Fine," she said. "Jason, take an Uber." My dad called over to my brother, who was scrolling on his phone. Jason glanced up, annoyed. "Seriously, this is about the trust thing, isn't it?" I didn't even answer. I slid into the back seat of my parents' car and waited. The drive out of Manhattan felt like it took a year. No music, no small talk, just the GPS voice and the sound of my dad's fingers tapping the steering wheel. I stared at the back of their heads and finally said, "How long have you known about that money?" My mom shifted in her seat. "Emily, tonight is not the time for this." "How long?" I repeated. My dad exhaled. "Since you were born," he said. "Mom set it up when you were a baby. You know how she is, always planning." "No," I said. "I did not know. I found out 30 seconds before dessert because she accidentally announced it in front of everyone. Why didn't you ever tell me? My mom twisted around to look at me. Because you were a child. Because it was complicated. Because it wasn't something you needed to worry about while you were growing up. I'm 26. I snapped. I have been drowning in loans for years. I was eating ramen in a studio in Brooklyn while you were paying for this steakhouse. You didn't think maybe I should worry about $3.6 million with my name on it. No one spoke after that. We pulled into their driveway in New Jersey, the same house I grew up in, now looking like a movie set to me. We went inside and my dad headed toward the kitchen like he always did after work, but I stopped in the doorway. "Sit," I said. They both looked at me like I'd slapped them. My dad pulled out a chair anyway. My mom stayed standing, arms crossed. "I want the truth," I said. "No more vague answers. No more, we'll talk later. Did Grandma set up a trust fund for me or not?" "Yes," my dad said quietly. "Did you agree to manage it until I was old enough?" "Yes." "Is the total supposed to be 3.6 million now, or was she making that up for drama?" My mom flinched. "It's around that," she said. "Markets go up and down. It's not simple, Emily." My throat felt dry. "Okay, then where is it?" Silence. Not the normal awkward kind, the heavy kind, like the air got thick. My dad rubbed his forehead. My mom finally sank into the chair across from me like her legs gave out. "It's not all there anymore," she said. My heart started hammering. "What does that mean? Not all there?" "We used some of it," my dad said. "We invested. For the family." I laughed. A short, ugly sound. "Invested in what?" "Because I definitely didn't get a better apartment out of this." My mom's voice got sharp. "Do not talk to us like we are strangers. We put you in good schools. We kept this roof over your head. We gave you every opportunity. That trust was for the family's future, and that includes your brother." "So how much did you invest?" I asked. My dad stared at the table. "About 2.75, he muttered. For a second, I actually thought I was going to be sick. 2.75 million, I repeated. "You spent $2.75 million that Grandma set aside for me, and you never told me it existed." "We didn't spend it," my mom said quickly. "We moved it. We used it to help Jason's company get off the ground and to cover expenses when the bank cut bonuses, and the second mortgage, and when the market tanked. It was all supposed to come back. We weren't stealing from you. We were borrowing from you." "Jason's company?" I said slowly. "The app that crashed in a year and never left beta. That company." My dad's jaw tightened. "It had real potential. Your brother is brilliant, he just needed runway." "I took out loans," I said, my voice shaking now. "I worked 2 jobs all through school. I skipped dentist appointments because I couldn't afford them. I moved into a cheap apartment with mold in the bathroom so I could make rent and minimum payments. And the whole time, you were using my trust fund like an ATM for Jason's runway and upgrades to this kitchen." My mom slammed her hand on the table. "We did what we had to do for this family. You have no idea what kind of pressure we were under. Private school, medical bills, college costs, the market. We thought we could fix it before you ever needed the money." "When were you planning on telling me?" I asked. "When I was 40. 50. Never." Neither of them answered. Jason hovered in the hallway, pretending not to listen, but I could see his reflection in the glass. "Did you know where the money came from?" I asked him directly. He shifted. "I knew Grandma set something up," he said. "Dad said it was for all of us if my startup took off. I didn't know there were rules." I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I stood anyway. "There are always rules," I said. "You just decided they didn't apply to you." My dad reached out like he could physically pull the conversation back. "Emily, sit down. We can figure this out as a family. We can talk to Grandma, we can move some things around, we can make a plan. I'm done talking tonight, I said. The next conversation we have about this, I'm going to know exactly what you did and what my options are. I grabbed my bag, walked past Jason, and stepped out into the cold air. My phone buzzed with texts before I even hit the sidewalk. I ignored all of them. On the train back to Brooklyn, I opened my browser and typed, "Can parents legally use your trust fund without telling you?" And then, how to find out where your trust money went. I scrolled through page after page of strangers' horror stories, my reflection in the dark window looking like someone I didn't recognize. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what I might find. I was afraid of what I already knew. The next few days blurred together in a way that didn't feel real, like I'd stepped sideways out of my own life and was just watching it from the ceiling. I went back to my apartment in Brooklyn, dropped my bag on the floor, and didn't pick it up again for 2 days. Emails from clients stacked up in my inbox. A brand I was supposed to create a campaign for sent 3 polite follow-ups and then a not-so-polite one. I stared at the subject lines and couldn't make myself care. I ordered takeout, let the containers pile up on the coffee table, and scrolled through one horror story after another. Adult children whose parents had drained college funds, grandparents whose wills were accidentally changed, trust accounts that vanished into bad investments that always seemed to benefit the same people. Every thread felt like a mirror, but twisted, like my situation was just the upgraded New York $3.6 million version. Maya showed up on the 3rd day without asking. She knocked once, and then used the spare key I'd given her back when our biggest problem was splitting rent. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said, stepping over my shoes. "I haven't," I said. "Also, my parents stole $3 million from me, so there's that." She blinked, took in the empty cartons and the laptop still open on a page titled "Financial Abuse by Family," and nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "We're going to do 2 things. 1, you're going to drink water. 2, you're going to call your grandma." I rubbed my eyes. She thinks I've been handling this money. She thinks I'm responsible. She's going to hate me. "Or," Maya said, handing me a glass like she was dealing with a feral cat, "she's going to hate the people who lied to both of you. She's the one who put the money there. She's the source. You need to go to the source." I stared at my phone for a long time after she left, the screen reflecting my face back at me, pale and blotchy and nothing like the polished girl from my mom's photos. Finally, I hit call. My grandma answered on the 2nd ring, her voice crisp as always. "Emily, darling, is everything all right?" My throat tightened. "No," I said. "Not really. Do you have a minute to talk about the fund?" There was a pause, just long enough to make my stomach drop. "Yes," she said. "I have more than a minute. Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the dinner, the car ride, the kitchen, my parents saying they had borrowed $2.75 million for Jason's company, and the house, and family expenses. I told her about the loans I'd taken, the jobs I'd worked, the fact that I hadn't even known the trust existed until she toasted me in front of everyone. She didn't interrupt. I could hear the faint tick of a clock in the background, like she was counting every word. When I finished, there was a long stretch of silence. "Emily," she said finally, and her voice had an edge I had never heard before. "Do you have access to a secure email?" "Yes," I said. "I'll send you some documents," she replied. "I kept copies of everything when we set up the trust, and a few years of statements. Your father stopped forwarding the more recent ones. I thought he was moving them to a different institution for tax reasons. It appears I was naive." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said automatically. "Didn't I?" she said softly. "I trusted people who did not deserve it. I will not make that mistake twice. Check your inbox in an hour." When her email came, it wasn't one attachment. It was 12. PDFs, scans of thick paper, signatures, bank logos. I opened the trust agreement first. My name was right there at the top, in black ink. The terms were simple enough even I could understand them. Grandma funded the account when I was born and added to it over time. My parents were listed as guardians until I turned 25, at which point I was supposed to have full control. No clause about family investments. No clause about using it for your brother's dream app. The last statement in her folder was from 3 years ago. The balance then was already over 3 million. My head started spinning as I did the math. If it had grown since then, 3.6 million at the dinner made sense. But the only way 2.75 could be gone now was if someone had been bleeding it dry behind our backs. I printed the main pages at the bodega downstairs and spread them out on my tiny kitchen table like evidence in some crime show. Then I opened a notebook and started writing everything down, not just the numbers, but how I felt. Angry, stupid, used, small. I wrote until my hand cramped, then flipped the page and kept going. It didn't fix anything, but for the first time since the glass clinked at that dinner, I felt a little less like I was drowning and a little more like I was treading water. That night, my grandma called back. "I've spoken to someone I trust," she said. Her name is Lauren Kim. She's a forensic accountant in the city. She helps people follow money when others are trying very hard to hide where it went. If you're willing, she can meet with us and request the full history on your trust. I looked at the papers on my table, the lines of my own handwriting circling words like stolen and lied and future. I thought about my parents in that big house in New Jersey, sitting in a kitchen they paid for with money that was supposed to be my safety net. "Yes," I said. "Set it up." I hung up, opened my laptop again, and this time when I typed, it wasn't another desperate question into a search bar. It was a new note at the top of my screen, in all caps. Find out exactly what they did and then decide what I'm going to do about it. Lauren Kim's office doesn't look like the kind of place where people's lives get taken apart and put back together. It looks like a minimalist Pinterest board. White walls, big windows, one plant that somehow isn't dead. She shakes my hand firmly, offers my grandma a seat, and then slides a legal pad in front of her like she's about to take a confession. "So," she says, calm and steady, "tell me what you think happened. Then we'll figure out what actually happened." I pass her the trust papers Grandma emailed me, the last statement she has, my own messy notes. She reads in silence, eyes flicking back and forth, occasionally underlining something with a pen. "All right," she says after a few minutes. "Here's the good news. This isn't vague. The trust is clear. The money was for you. Your parents were guardians, not owners. They had a legal duty to protect the assets, not treat them like a family checking account." "And the bad news?" I ask. "The bad news is we're going to need every statement from the past few years," she says. "Your grandmother's copies stopped 3 years ago. Your parents clearly diverted the mail and communication after that. We need to see exactly when they started pulling money and where they sent it." She has me and Grandma sign authorization forms so she can request the records from the bank directly. She explains things in a way I can actually follow, about custodian responsibilities and fiduciary duty, and how paper trails are like fingerprints, even when people try to wipe them off. 2 weeks later, I'm back in her office staring at a stack of pages thick enough to be a manuscript. Lauren has color-coded everything: blue for normal investment activity, red for withdrawals tied to my parents, orange for anything linked to Jason. There is a lot of red and orange. "This," she says, tapping a cluster of red lines, "is when things went off the rails. Around the time your brother launched his company. They started moving large chunks out of the trust into an LLC tied to him and another one tied to your father. Over the next few years, about 2.75 million leaves your account." "And goes where?" I ask. even though I already know I'm not going to like the answer. Into the LLC that funded your brother's startup, she says. Into a real estate holding company that owns your parents' lake house. Into checking accounts that line up with home renovations, car payments, private school tuition for your cousin, assorted consulting fees that look suspiciously like their lifestyle. She flips to another page. They also set up something called the Evelyn Future Leaders Grant. Sounds nice. Only beneficiary is Jason. They pulled money from your trust and labeled it grant disbursement. On paper, it looks like charity. In reality, it's just another pipe feeding his company. My stomach clenches. So they didn't just lie, I say. They built an entire fake structure to make the lie look legitimate. People rarely steal this much on impulse, Lauren says. They plan it. They rationalize it. They tell themselves it's temporary, that they'll pay it back when the big break comes. Then the big break never comes, and the hole just gets deeper. She pauses. Emily, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is misappropriation of trust assets on a massive scale. That night, I call my grandma to update her. She's quiet for so long, I think the call dropped. Your father did something similar to my sister once, she says finally. I didn't want to believe her. I told myself she was bitter, that she was exaggerating. I was wrong. That sends me down a different path. I text an aunt I haven't seen in years, my dad's younger sister, the one who stopped coming to Thanksgiving without explanation. Her name is Rebecca Miller, Aunt Becky to me when I was little. I ask if she has time for a call about something family and money related. Her response comes back in under a minute. I've been waiting 20 years for someone else in this family to ask that question. Call me. We talk for an hour. She tells me how she was supposed to get a small inheritance from our grandfather, enough for a condo, how my dad managed the estate and then told her the taxes wiped it out. She never saw a single statement. She never had proof, just a sick feeling that he'd taken what was hers. Hearing her say, I believe you, and I'm sorry they did it to you too, makes something in my chest unclench and burn at the same time. Between Lauren's spreadsheets, Grandma's documents, and Aunt Becky's story, a picture is forming that I can't unsee. This isn't one bad decision, it's a pattern. It's who they are when no one is watching. Lauren meets with me and Aunt Becky over video and lays out next steps. We send a formal demand letter, she says. We outline the amount, the transactions, the breach of duty. We give them a chance to return the funds or propose a real repayment plan. If they refuse, we escalate. Civil suit, and if necessary, referrals for tax and fraud investigations. But you need to decide what you want. Do you want your money back quietly, or are you willing to go to war for the full truth? I sit there, staring at the red and orange lines that used to be my safety net, my home, my options. I think about my parents in that house, acting like I should be grateful for steak dinners bought with my erased future. I want both, I say finally. I want my money back. And I want them to have to look at what they did and know it's not just going to disappear this time. Lauren nods. Then we'll give them a chance to do the right thing, she says. And when they don't, we'll be ready. As I leave her office, the city feels different. The buildings are the same, the noise is the same, but for the first time since that glass clinked, I don't feel like I'm waiting for something to happen to me. I feel like I'm the one about to make something happen, and I know exactly whose world it's going to hit first. The demand letter went out on a Tuesday afternoon, emailed and sent certified mail, 10 pages of calm, precise fury wrapped in legal language. Lauren and our lawyer, Daniel, had gone over every word. It laid out the facts, the amount taken, the dates, the entities they used, the duties they violated, and then it gave them options. Return the money, or propose a concrete repayment plan backed by real collateral, step down as trustees, sign the appropriate documents, And we keep this civil. Literally and figuratively. No threats, no drama, just a very clear line in the sand. For 3 days, nothing. No calls, no emails, just that weird, buzzing silence I'd started to recognize as them scrambling. On day 4, I woke up to an email from my father with the subject line, "Let's talk like a family." The body was exactly what I expected. A soft apology wrapped around a hard refusal to accept responsibility. "We never meant to hurt you. We always intended to pay everything back. We did what we thought was best for everyone. Lawyers only make things worse. Let's sit down, the three of us, and work this out quietly." He copied my mother, of course, but not my grandma. I forwarded it to Lauren and Daniel. Lauren replied, "They're trying to pull this out of the formal process so they can control the narrative again. Don't go alone. Don't agree to anything without us." Instead of emailing my dad back, I texted him one sentence. "We can talk in person on Sunday at 11 at the cafe by the park." Then I texted my grandma and asked her to be there. She responded with one word: "Always." That night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something that made my stomach churn and my spine straighten at the same time. Whether I won or lost, this wasn't just about me anymore. Aunt Becky's story, Grandma's near miss, the way my parents had turned my trust into a silent funding source for Jason's fantasy, it was all part of the same disease: secrecy, entitlement. The assumption that no one would ever question them. That's when I opened my laptop and wrote something I'd been drafting in my head for weeks, an anonymous post on Reddit. I changed names, I blurred details, but I didn't change the bones. My parents secretly spent $2.75 million from a trust my grandma set up for me. I found out at my graduation dinner. Here's what I've learned so far. I hit post and went to make coffee, expecting a handful of strangers to maybe respond. By the time the coffee finished dripping, the post had hundreds of comments. By that evening, it had thousands. People from everywhere were telling me their own stories, some smaller, some bigger, all carrying the same ache. A few lawyers chimed in to say our demand letter sounded solid. A TikTok creator who did story times about financial abuse messaged asking if they could share my story. Anonymized. I said yes. I wasn't naming my parents, but I wasn't hiding what they'd done either. It was weirdly comforting, knowing that even if they tried to spin this as me being an ungrateful daughter, there were thousands of people out there who had seen the pattern and called it what it was. Theft. Sunday came fast. The cafe by Central Park was one of those places my mom loved, all exposed brick and overpriced lattes. I got there early with a folder in my bag, copies of Lauren's charts, the trust agreement, printouts of their own signatures on transfer orders. My grandma arrived a few minutes later in her usual pressed blouse and slacks, pearls at her throat like armor. She kissed my cheek, sat down, and folded her hands. "You look steady," she said. "I feel like I'm going to throw up," I said. "Then you're probably ready," she replied. My parents walked in 5 minutes late together, dressed like they were going to brunch with friends, not an ambush of their own making. My mom's smile was tight. My dad's was practiced. It faded when he saw Grandma sitting next to me. "Mother," he said, "I didn't realize you'd be here." "That is obvious," she said. "Sit down." What followed wasn't dramatic in the way movies make these scenes. There was no shouting, no plates breaking, just my parents trying every tactic they knew and watching them die in the air. They minimized. "We didn't think you'd need all of it right away." They rationalized. "We used it to give Jason a chance, to keep the family afloat." They guilt-tripped. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, with lawyers." I didn't argue. I laid out the papers. I pointed to the dates, the entities, the fake grant. I told them the exact number Lauren had calculated, down to the last cent. My dad's face went gray. My mom's hand shook as she flipped through the pages. "You were never supposed to see this," she whispered, and then realized exactly what she'd admitted. I told them about the demand letter, the timeline, the consequences. I told them about Aunt Becky. I watched my father flinch when he heard her name. And then, because I'm my grandmother's granddaughter, I gave them one last, clean choice. Honor the demand, sign the documents, step back, and spare themselves the public humiliation of a trial, or refuse, and watch this go as far as it needed to go. They didn't answer that day. My dad said they needed time to think. My mom said she felt betrayed. Grandma just stood, rested a hand on my shoulder, and told them very clearly that she would back whatever I chose. As we walked out into the sun, my phone buzzed. A notification from Reddit told me my post had just crossed 100,000 upvotes. Somewhere out there, strangers knew more of the truth than the people who had sat across from me at Sunday dinner my whole life. And for the first time, that felt less like a nightmare and more like a weapon I was finally learning how to use. They did exactly what Lauren said they would do. They went quiet. For a week after that cafe meeting, there was nothing. No calls, no emails, just this heavy silence that felt less like peace and more like the pause before a storm. Then the storm showed up in my inbox wearing a suit. The email was from a law firm I did not recognize. Subject line, response to demand. Attached was a PDF full of legal cushioning around a very simple offer. They would repay $500,000 over 10 years with no interest on the condition that I sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree never to speak or post about the matter again. They also wanted me to acknowledge that they had acted in good faith for the benefit of the family. I read it once, twice, felt my jaw clench harder each time, and forwarded it to Lauren and Daniel with one sentence. "Absolutely not." Daniel called me 5 minutes later. "This is insulting," he said. "They are testing how serious you are. We are going to show them." We sent a rejection the same day. No counter, just a restatement of the original demand. Full restitution of the $2.75 million taken from the trust, reasonable interest, removal of my parents as trustees, no gag order. A few days later, another email came, this time for $750,000, still with an NDA, still wrapped in language about avoiding unnecessary pain. I did not even bother replying personally. Daniel drafted a 2-sentence response and then looked at me across his desk. "You understand what happens if we push this button," he said. "Once we file, this is public record. There is no going back to quiet." I thought about the Reddit thread with hundreds of strangers telling me I was not crazy. I thought about Aunt Becky, about my grandma's face in that cafe, about the years of my life I had spent making minimum payments while my trust bought lake views and new countertops. "Push it," I said. "I am done being their secret." The civil suit was filed in New York Supreme Court 2 weeks later. The caption had my name on one side and my parents' names on the other. Seeing it printed made my hands shake, but not with fear, with anger that finally had somewhere to go. Discovery was brutal, but not for us. With court orders behind them, Lauren and Daniel pulled everything. Bank statements, tax returns, internal emails, corporate filings for Jason's LLC, even the credit card charges that lined up perfectly with the trust withdrawals. Every Hawaii trip, every designer bag, every consulting fee they paid themselves out of my account got its own line in a spreadsheet. Jason tried to delete some records from his company's cloud drive. The hosting service turned over the deletion logs. It just made him look worse. Their lawyers tried a different angle next. They sent a letter hinting that I was damaging the family's reputation and suggesting that if I did not back off, they might countersue for defamation over my anonymous posts online. Daniel actually laughed when he read it. "They can huff and puff," he said, "but the truth is an absolute defense. You have the documents. You have not named them publicly. They are bluffing." When the trial date finally came, I thought I would throw up in the courthouse bathroom and never come out. Instead, I walked into that wood-paneled room, sat at the plaintiff's table between Daniel and Lauren, and looked straight ahead. My parents sat at the defense table, my mother in a dark blazer, my father in a suit that suddenly looked a little too big on him. Jason was behind them, shifting in his seat, eyes darting anywhere but toward me. I testified on the first day. It was not some dramatic movie speech. It was me answering questions, telling the story I had already told 100 times, but this time with a court reporter typing every word. I talked about the graduation dinner, about the car ride, about the kitchen confrontation, about the loans, the jobs, the nights I lay awake wondering how I was going to pay for next month's rent, while a fund with my name on it was being drained in the background. Daniel walked me through the documents. I identified the trust agreement, the statements, the transfer authorizations my parents had signed. The judge listened, occasionally asking a clarifying question, his face giving nothing away. Grandma testified next. She was small in the witness box, but there was nothing small about her voice. She told the court why she had created the trust, how she had intended it for me specifically, not as a general family fund, how she had trusted her son to manage it, and how that trust had been betrayed. When Daniel asked her if she had ever consented to the money being used for Jason's startup, for the house on the lake, for private school tuition for anyone else, she looked straight at my parents and said one word: never. Lauren took the stand with her color-coded charts. She walked the judge through the flow of money like she was explaining a circuit diagram, clean and unavoidable. Then Aunt Becky testified about what had happened to her inheritance years ago, how my father had told her taxes had eaten it, how she had never seen a single page of paperwork. Their lawyers did their best to spin it. They painted my parents as loving but overwhelmed, people who had made imperfect decisions under financial stress. They tried to suggest that because I had benefited from the house and the schooling growing up, the trust had indirectly helped me, so using it for those things was not truly theft. The judge did not look impressed. On the third day, after closing arguments, he took a recess and then came back with a written decision. He read the key parts aloud. He found that my parents had breached their fiduciary duty as trustees, that they had willfully misappropriated trust assets for unauthorized purposes, that their attempts to disguise withdrawals as grants and investments showed knowledge of wrongdoing, not confusion. Then he ordered them, jointly and severally, to repay the full $2.75 million loss to the trust, plus interest, within 120 days. He removed them as trustees effective immediately and named a professional trustee to oversee the account. He authorized liens on their properties and accounts to secure the judgment and referred portions of the case file to the state tax authorities for review. My mother started crying then, quiet and shaking. My father just stared straight ahead, his face completely blank, like if he did not react it somehow would not be real. I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not joy exactly, not relief exactly. More like a deep, heavy exhale I had been holding for years without realizing it. Outside the courthouse, the air felt colder and cleaner. Lauren shook my hand. Daniel said, "Congratulations. You just held them accountable in the one place they cannot talk their way out of." I looked up at the gray stone building behind us and thought about all the nights I had wondered if I was overreacting, if I was ungrateful, if I should just swallow it like Aunt Becky had been forced to do. The answer sat in my favor in a stamped court order in Daniel's briefcase. They had taken my future and treated it like a slush fund. Now, for once, the consequences were theirs to live with. The money didn't hit my account with some magical sound effect. There was no confetti when the numbers changed, just a refreshed balance on a screen that made my hands shake so hard I had to put the phone down. The trustee wired the restored funds in stages as the house sold, the lake place sold, The investments were liquidated. Every time another chunk landed, I paid something off. First, the student loans. Years of estimated payoff date 2043 vanished in a single afternoon. Then the credit cards. The lingering medical bill I'd been ignoring. The tiny, stupid store card I'd opened at 19 for a 20% discount and been chained to ever since. Watching all those balances drop to zero felt less like winning the lottery and more like finally cutting a weight I hadn't realized I'd been dragging for a decade. After that, I sat down with a different financial planner, someone the trustee recommended, someone who had never met my parents and didn't care about family drama, only math and risk tolerance. We built a portfolio that wasn't about revenge or flexing, just stability. Boring index funds, a conservative slice in bonds, a plan for a down payment if I ever wanted to buy instead of rent. For the first time, my future was numbers I could see instead of a foggy panic. I didn't call my parents to tell them any of this. I found out through Aunt Becky that they'd moved into a much smaller townhouse after the judgment, that my dad was doing consulting work that paid a fraction of what the bank had, that my mom had taken a part-time job at a community center and told people she'd chosen a simpler life. Jason ended up working behind the counter at an electronics store, explaining features on laptops bought with the kind of money he'd once burned through in a week. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their consequences were happening with or without my attention. What I did pay attention to was the email I kept getting from strangers. After my case became public record, some online sleuths connected it to my anonymous Reddit post, and eventually, I decided anonymity wasn't doing much for me anymore. I agreed to one interview, carefully, with boundaries, and then I launched the thing I'd been scribbling in notebooks since the night I spread those trust papers on my kitchen table, a podcast. Every episode, I talked to someone who'd been financially betrayed by the people they were supposed to be able to trust the most. Parents, spouses, siblings. I brought on lawyers, accountants, therapists. We broke down red flags, basic concepts like what a trustee is actually required to do, how to ask questions without feeling like you're accusing everyone of being a thief. I named it Glass Half Full, because for a long time that sound of my grandma's glass clinking had felt like the start of everything breaking, and now it felt like the moment the truth finally had a chance to pour out. Grandma didn't get to hear most of it. She died the following spring, quietly, in her sleep, after sending me one last card in her neat handwriting telling me she was proud, not because I'd won, but because I hadn't let them shut me up. She left me her house and a portion of her estate. I cried when I found out, not because of the property, but because even in her will she refused to pretend everything was fine. I sold the house and used a slice of the money to start a small fund in her name that pays for forensic accounting consults and first meetings with lawyers for young adults who suspect something is wrong with their family finances. It's not huge, but it's something real that exists in the world now, like a tiny force field against the kind of silence that almost swallowed me. People sometimes ask if I forgive my parents. I don't have a neat answer. I don't lie awake at night planning their ruin anymore. I don't check on them, don't stalk their social media. I don't wish them dead. Mostly, I just don't let them occupy space in my decisions. That, for me, is enough for now. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's not never trust anyone, and it's not money ruins everything. It's simpler and uglier. Power without accountability will always find a way to take more, especially when it can hide behind words like family and sacrifice. You are allowed to ask where the money is. You are allowed to want to see statements, to read documents, to say no when something feels off, even if the person on the other side of the table changed your diapers or paid for your braces. And if you ever hear a glass clink at a dinner and someone announces a future you didn't know you were supposed to have, I hope you remember this. It might feel like your world is ending, but sometimes that sound is just the crack in the story you were handed. the place where you finally get to start writing your own.